Hello everyone, today I'll be reviewing The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. So The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King came out 2003, was directed by Peter Jackson and is the third and final instalment in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So this film actually starts off way before the film series takes place. So it starts off with Gollum finding the One Ring. And in these days, Gollum was a hobbit named Smeagol, and he comes across the One Ring, and it begins to possess him and really take control of him, and it leads Smeagol into the character we know as Gollum, where he becomes entirely confused and possessed by this ring, and he's sort of shunned, and he goes out into the mountains, and he ends up living there all by himself. Then, of course, we end up where the story takes place now, immediately after the events of the Two Towers, and Gollum is with Frodo and Sam on the way to Mordor in order to destroy the One Ring. We also have Merry Pippin, Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas and Gandalf, obviously, and after the events of the Two Towers, Merry and Pippin, along with one of the Ents named Treebeard, have pretty much destroyed Isengard. And this film actually really shows a different side to the characters of Merry and Pippin, because before, in the previous two films, Merry and Pippin are very much comic relief characters. They had very funny moments in the films, they had some funny dialogue, and were generally pretty harmless characters, very likeable characters. And in this film takes a slightly different approach to these characters. So Merry and Pippin actually have to split up at one point, and they have separate storylines of their own, and as characters, Merry and Pippin really become heroes in this film. They have to take on challenges and end up both involving some combat scenes with them as well, which is very interesting. So as you can probably expect, being a Lord of the Rings film, this has lots of exciting action scenes, and if you've seen the first two films, which obviously I hope you have because this is part of a trilogy, then you will be very impressed by the amount of scenes in this. There are so many excellent battle scenes. Possibly the best scene in the film, I think, is the Minas Tirith battle scene, where we get all the orcs coming along towards Minas Tirith, and they're all charging forward, and I have these catapults and all this equipment which are firing at all the buildings and all the towers, and it really does look excellent on screen. And then of course we have these giant elephant creatures known as Mumakil, who come charging in, mowing down lots of horses and people. This whole sequence is very elaborate and a very epic scene, and it is, well, for me personally, the standout scene of the film. I think the star of this film for me is probably the character Gollum, actually, who is portrayed by Andy Serkis, because he's absolutely crazy in this film. And obviously Gollum is really two characters. He's often Smeagol and Gollum, and he's going back and forth between the way he talks to Frodo and Sam. And actually there is real conflict between Sam and Gollum in this film. Each character is trying to convince the other that the other one is evil. They're both trying to convince Frodo that the other one is evil. And we really get some interesting scenes with these two characters playing off of each other and having that conflict. And for actually during the first half of this film, Frodo in particular, it seems very much in the background because he's been so possessed by this ring that he's almost like a ghost and is almost just drifting along, talking really quietly, and Sam really has to help pull him together. So this film was actually successful at the Academy Awards. It won 11 Oscars, which is a record only matched by Ben-Hur and Titanic. So it's very impressive. This film also won the most important Oscar, which is the one for Best Picture, the best film of the year. It was very unusual for a film like this to win the Oscar for Best Picture. You don't normally get fantasy films winning the Best Picture Oscar. It just seems quite strange. Normally it's a drama or it's something a lot more realistic. But this was obviously such a big film, so impressive, and the Academy obviously recognised what an impressive achievement in filmmaking this movie was. So I ended up giving it lots of awards, which in my opinion is well deserved. because it's an excellent film, and when I compare this to the first two films, I think this is probably my favourite of the bunch. And I think as a whole the trilogy is absolutely fantastic, and this film really is an excellent way to finish off that trilogy. Now, if I was to say anything bad about the film, to be honest, there's not much bad I can say about this film. I will say that the ending probably does go on a little bit too long, and this is a very long film, just like the previous two Lord of the Rings films are. This film is actually 3 hours 20 minutes long, and if I'm to be completely honest, probably the last 20 minutes or half an hour of the film probably wasn't completely necessary. It reaches a point where you think the film is about to end, and then there's another scene afterwards and you think, oh, okay, yeah, this is quite a good scene, and then you think it's about to end, and no, then it goes on to another scene, then it explains something else, and it does tend to go on quite a bit. But I can completely understand why they decided to do this, because this whole trilogy has been absolutely magnificent. Obviously, this is such a big film series, and obviously, as I said, each film is very long, so we've really got to know these characters and got to know these events. So I'm sure the filmmakers just wanted us to give a proper goodbye to this world and to all these characters who we've known over watching these films. I must also mention the actor John Noble, who's in this film, who plays Denethor, and he's a very interesting character because he's a very dark character. He's a father of Faramir and Boromir, and he does have some particular standout scenes in this film as well. But overall, as a movie, this is incredible. It's an absolute must-see. If you like this kind of epic fantasy films, this is absolutely superb. One of those greatest types of films, one of the greatest epic fantasy films there is. Some people may find it a little bit overlong, but if you don't find it too long, there is actually an extended cut of this film which goes on for over 4 hours. In fact, with this film trilogy, you can get an extended version of all three. As you can imagine, that goes on for about 11 or 12 hours, I believe, which I haven't actually watched the extended cut of the films, but maybe someday I will, but I'm not sure that I have time for that. So overall, as you can expect, I really love this film. I think it's a fantastic end to the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and now that I've watched and reviewed all three of these films, I can really look back at this trilogy and see what an impressive achievement it was for Peter Jackson to do, and it really is worth watching these films if you can watch them all together. Perhaps not in one sitting, obviously, but if you can watch them all fairly close together, you can really get a sense of what an achievement these films are and how brilliant they are. So you won't be surprised to know that I'm going to give Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King a rating of 10 out of 10. As I've said, if you're going to watch this, I recommend watching The Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers first, and that will really build you up to this film, The Return of the King. So there we go. So that is my review of The Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King. So what do you guys think? Have you seen Return of the King? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Please let me know down in the comments section what your thoughts are. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.